I'm going to talk about a modification I made about creating primitives. So currently, the code that is deployed, if you go pull up your menu and you try to create a primitive, let me move something here because it only creates it at the origin. So, okay, I'm going to click here for a box and it'll create here. So the moment I click it, the message goes to the server and then it broadcasts. So we have to wait for the server to tell us even though we click right here. So if I click, it's almost like a second before this thing appears, which I think we can make it a bit more responsive. So let me demonstrate this again. Now I'll click create a sphere, click. Okay, so let's see if we can improve upon that. So the code changes that I did here, which I'll go over in git diff, make the changes. So, well, before doing that, here's the main change. So in the primitives menu, we have a callback when we click on one of the links, box, cone, sphere, grid, plane. And what I do is I don't create it at the origin. So wherever the active camera is facing, we get the forward array 1 meter in front of us. And then we take the ray origin, which comes from the camera, and add it to that ray direction, because this is a vector. So we're saying this is the destination of where we want to have our primitive. So the get forward array will be the vector pointing from ourselves to a position 1 meter in front of us. But because it's a vector, it doesn't have a position. So we need to take the origin, which is actually a position, add it to the direction, which gives us the location 1 meter in front of us. Then we need to calculate a couple of things, which normally we're waiting for the server side to generate, like a randomly generated name based on the primitive underscore the entity. So if you look at what we get for search space, if we visit the debugger, the scene debugger, we can show that these nodes have box underscore blah 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 1 2 3 4 5 6, actually 6 random letters and numbers. And they also have this ID. So the backend, the server side, is creating an ID and a name for them, and it's not asking for you to provide them. It just automatically creates them so there's no collisions. So we need to create that in the front end. So we generate this primitive, which is the type, basically what you clicked on here, the construct. Then it generates a random UUID. And to do that, we brought in the UUID library. And what else? Then we assemble the components to make the API call, which is the position, which is coming from that destination. Rotation, no rotation at the moment. And scale, let's just ones all across. And a color, which I guess can be white, could be the base color for all, the default color. And this, we reuse that find or create mesh that we have. This way, if we get a message from broadcast, it will find the previous mesh that we already have created locally. It won't create it twice. So this API requires the type, so we send the primitive, then the name, the UUID, and the components. But the components takes a slightly different format. It expects an array of objects with a key of type as the string of the construct and the data, which is the value of these things. Whereas the backend expects an object with keys. So slightly different format, but that's fine. So then we use Signal Hub to emit this to Spaces API, calling the remote procedure call with the arguments, and the backend will just broadcast that out. So if we look on our backend, we have added a well, our space channel always forwarded these types. So space channel, when it gets a space API, it just delegates that to the spaces module, converts the function name into an atom, and then passes along the arguments, but appending or prepending the space, which is how these functions in the spaces module will work, at least for the spaces API. So we added a new function to the spaces API. It's the same as add entity with broadcast. Where add entity with broadcast, we're asking the server to add it. Please add it. Here's the space, and here's the entity kind. And then this thing will go and create it and broadcast it with default components at the origin with and broadcast that out. But if you have already pre-created it, then you don't want to use the default ones. You want to use the ones you pass in. So we're passing in, of course, the space is the first one, UUID, name, entity kind, and then those components. And then we place those into the attributes using some helper functions. And then again, we call create entity, which will go and call the database, make the entity and also the components. But the front end didn't have to wait. So while this is doing all of that and coming back, the front end should be able to just create that. So if I believe that's the gist of it. So why don't we try to deploy this and see how it works out. So let's see, is there anything else? Let's do a git diff to see if there's anything worth mentioning. What did I write here? It's a typo in there. Create a backend spaces to receive data for, yes. Okay, let's go to the next. Create a backend spaces function to receive data for an entity pre-created on the front end. That's what we did here. To create an entity gizmo that brings up all the menu. Okay, so we haven't done this. Select mic and output if on the quest for primitive member state. Create where you click. Yeah, so we're not creating where we click. We're creating where we're facing. So hopefully that works out. You might be facing a weird area, but I think it's close enough for you that you can just grab it. All right. Duplicate. Okay. Now what else? So we removed the entity plane container stuff from the last video. So that's just cleaning up some of those things. Primitive subscription. Let's see, under primitive, let's see if there's any unused things at the top. So we're not using toggle. We're not using span. Here's a subscription. Are we using this? Subscription. Yeah, it doesn't seem like we're populating this thing. Sub. Yeah, I don't think this is being used. What else? That's what I just talked about. And mesh built. Local events. I don't think we use this one. So let's see. Signal hub. We have started off on this maybe internal message, but I don't think that's necessary. We can remove that. What else? Okay, so we added a library, UID. Hopefully that's not too large. Added entity is the space, and then, oh yes, We made it so that we can call build default components will just not do anything if components are passed in. So this was important, and we added some tests around this. Add entity with broadcast. Oh, this is in a file that this may go away. I don't think this is being used. So we have a test that uses this, and I think we are golden, right? So if we do next test, all our tests pass. Let's deploy. This will be video 104, session 104, and we are pre-create primitive locally where we face. Push origin. Let's deploy. So I'll pause the video here and then we can test it out. Okay, our code is now deployed. Let's see if this will be more responsive. So if I click into spaces, here's A. Okay. No real noticeable delay in download. It's about the same. So let me face over here and let's create a cone. There's a cone. Oh, 000 is all black. Oh, I should have put FFF, but that seems like it works. Box, it's extremely fast now. Sphere. Yep. Okay, so that works. I just don't like the color. But yeah, so we'll make a tweak, and let's make it. We can make it really fast. So here is the primitive, and let's make this FF, and make that a bug fix. Change default prim color. Okay, and I'll stop the video here.